You can live a life full of love and light if you just let the Spirit guide you. It's the remedy where you'll find peace, but you must let the Spirit guide you.
Who made y'all priests?
What's up, world? This is Awo Fafore.
What's going on, good people? This is Awo Oseun. Welcome back to the Who Made Y'all Priests podcast, where we talk about our spiritual journeys, our everyday life experiences, and the issues of the time from the perspective of two people who just happen to be priests. Fafore, man, I see you with the magenta on, man.
With the Mahoo?
Magenta, man. You know that's magenta when you bought it. That's how you ordered it. Exactly from Amazon. You put on there. You put on Amazon magenta t-shirt.
No, man. This is hot pink. You know what I'm saying? I'm feeling sexy in my hot pink. You know, I felt like because of, you know, the person we got interviewing today who coming to speak with us, it just, you know, was fitting, throwing a little hot pink. I felt a little sexy, so I could match my skin tone a little bit.
You know what that makes me remember is the post that you put up on Facebook about the dudes in the gym doing exercises to get their booties big. And my response was, look at God. Now you wearing hoochie shorts, hoochie daddy shorts, doing the same thing in the gym.
You know, hey, so, you know, as we always mention, our Luo always talks about how EFI has changed, right? So, you know, as you learn and you go through this life, sometimes you got to progress and change, move forward. Some of the things that you thought about yesterday, some of the things that you applied yesterday, you realize just through experience, you know, no longer works for you. So, you know, I was like, you know what, the hoochie daddy shorts was kind of all right. And now it makes sense. The exercises they was doing because they was getting themselves prepared, you know, for the hoochie daddy shorts. So I was like, you know, hey, so yeah, you know, now I'm in the gym doing hip thrusts, you know what I'm saying, and you know, deadlifts and all that good stuff. You know, I ain't doing the one yet. I usually only see women doing that, like where they kick the one leg, you know, out front, and then they do it one leg at a time. Like I ain't started doing that yet.
What about the one where you put the barbell on your hip and thrust up?
That's hip thrust.
Oh, that's the hip thrust. Oh, you be doing
I be in there getting them.
I'll be dying laughing when I came.
hey.
I'ma die laughing.
hey, I be in there getting them. You know what I'm saying? Like my weight ain't all the way there yet, because I be seeing women in the gym killing the hip thrust. I mean, it be stacked on there, like how Mia have it on the bench press. So, you know what I'm saying? I ain't there with it yet, but yeah, hip thrust, and I do the now I always mess this up. I don't know if it's abductor or adductor, but it's the one where you sit down and then like the pad be on like on your knees and you push your leg out like that.
Yeah, that's called a peekaboo. That's what that's called. That's called a peekaboo. You doing the peekaboo?
Like peekaboo. Hey, that's hilarious.
Now I'm gonna walk past you with my basketball and be like, "This the same dude talking about he gonna beat me one-on-one."
Yeah,
doing hip thrust and peekaboo.
Yeah, because you ain't got no adductors. Like you need.
You ain't even for sure that's what it is.
Abductor. I'm just gonna call it. I think it's abductor. You ain't got no abductors. You know what I'm saying? So you're not gonna be able to handle me on the box. You know what I'm saying? So I'm telling you, man. So hey, this is my new thing that I tell people. We are all bodybuilders. So it's up to you to determine the type of body you want to build. You know what I'm saying? So I'm trying to get calves. You know, I'm trying to get, you know, booty and chest, back, and everything. You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna hit it all. You know what I'm saying? Forearms, I'm gonna get all of it.
I feel you.
You know what
I
I'm
ain't
saying?
judging you.
So
I ain't judging you at all.
yeah.
Just a little bit, but not a whole lot though.
All right, hey, listen. When I bust out these hoochie daddy shorts this summer,
It's gonna be
I
different from
guarantee
last summer.
way different. Now that I'm hip to the hip thrust,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? I'm getting deep in my squats. Yo, yeah, I'm ready. I'm
I
ready.
feel you. I feel you,
Yeah.
man. I feel you.
So,
That's
so
why we make that's why we make a good team, man. Some things you gonna do that I ain't gonna do, and it's some things I'm gonna do that you ain't gonna do. So, we like complementary opposites, man. I feel you.
absolutely, absolutely. But all this talk about deep squats and hip thrust, just put me in the whole space of, this week's show. So you want to just hop into it?
Let's get it, man.
All right.
Ibeji, Aboro Boye, what's going on, man?
Boro boy, yeah.
Alboata, Sherwa, Wofa. How y'all fellas doing?
Man,
Good, man. Good.
we glad that you could take some time out of your busy schedule, man, to come kick it with your veggies, man. It's been a long time since we talked to you last time.
Most definitely, most definitely. I'm glad to be here. I appreciate the invite.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
man.
yeah.
You looking good.
Well, beer came back in, so that's always good.
Yeah, yeah. You like you hydrating.
Got to.
You get like you getting your 8 glasses of water in a day.
Yeah, I've actually been making a concerted effort to be a little bit healthier. I got to get this COVID weight off at some point. So we just putting in the work little by little.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's the Virgo thing to do. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We come
I
here
can
to
see
be
you. I
healthy.
can see your eyebrows now too. I can see like all the way see them now. I can all the way see your eyebrows. Jimmy's still struggling. Fafore, he's struggling.
Hey man, my eyebrows wasn't big to begin with.
All right.
That's why
Right.
I was gonna ask to get a doctor's note. So I can get,
Yeah,
so I
cats
can
weren't
get,
hearing that, yeah.
yeah, so I can get
Yeah.
excused from that part of the experience.
Right. So introduce yourself to the family. Tell us who you are, what you do. Tell us about yourself.
All right, so I am Awo Olameni. I am a priest of Arunala, a Beji to y'all and the
I
rest of
say,
our brothers from that glorious experience in 2021. Um, I'm just a priest trying to figure it out, like everybody else.
Right.
I should.
So, as is customary on the Who Made Y'all Priest podcast, where we talk about our spiritual journeys, everybody that we interview, we ask them about their spiritual journey and the trajectory that led them eventually to E5. So, talk to us about that. Tell us about any spiritual systems that you may have dabbled in before getting to E5. Tell us about that.
Sure. I come from the church. So both of my parents are Christian ministers, and I come from a long line of ministers and church officials. I grew up in church. And when I say I grew up in church, I spent more time in my home church than I did in my house growing up. And I did that till I graduated high school. And so I grew up with Christianity as sort of just a fact of life. This was the objective reality of the world. And that's just how I lived and approached things. When I went to college, that was an eye-opening experience because I was meeting people who had never been to church before, who were practicing different traditions. And as I was sort of thinking about how they were living and what their perspectives in life were, I found myself unable to sort of maintain sort of the faith that I had been brought up with, because I couldn't logic my way to being like, okay, well, my way or the way I was raised was right or better than any of their other. They were all good and decent people who had convictions that were just as strong as mine. And so I just couldn't map out the difference between what I was doing, and what they were doing. So at that point, I just started exploring. So I've studied Islam, I've studied Buddhism, I've studied Hinduism for a little while. It was just a matter of just exploring and understanding these other cultures and what their perspectives were and how that challenged, what I grew up with and what I came from. And eventually I found Ifa, and the rest is history.
So, being that you grew up in the church the way you did, And for so long, like that was your foundation. What was it about E5 that when you found E5, you were like, yeah, this is it right here?
So I don't have a pretty answer for that because it's not a concise thing. E5 just made a certain kind of sense for me that just felt right. I'd gone back to church like a couple times to see if like it was still real for me. Because for me, religion isn't like a fact thing, it's a feeling thing, it's about meaning. And I had just gotten to a point where it had stopped meaning what it used to mean. It was more nostalgia than what it was anything. Ifa was unique in the way that it approached the world, and I found that very, very interesting. And it just felt like something I needed to keep diving into, so I did.
That's dope. That's dope. Kind of a similar story with me. I mean, I fell in love with, I also studied Hinduism, Buddhism, all that different stuff. I fell in love with Taoism. So I was looking for Taoism that had a cultural connection, because if I had found me a Mr. Miyagi who, that might have sounded a little racist, but that's not what it. That's not how I meant it. But if I had found me an Asian man or a woman who was, very well versed in Taoism, I probably would be Taoist right now. But yeah, I was just looking for the same type of energy, the same type of feeling, just with some kind of cultural connectivity. So,
right, and it was pretty much the same for me. Once I found Rosicrucianism, I feel like I had the benefit. This may sound bad, but I had the benefit of not growing up in the church, of not having Christianity forced upon me. And it wasn't until I went to prison that I started to dabble into the Bible and then started to consider myself to be a Christian. But it wasn't until I found Rosicrucianism and fell in love with the mystical and the esoteric that eventually led me to E5. But it's similar to Fafore in that I fell in love with the principles and the teachings, but there was no cultural connectivity. There was nothing inside of it that looked like me. And I felt like the Rosicrucians did everything they could to make that so. Even though they traced their history back to Egypt, even though they traced their history back to Africa, no one looked like me. So I eventually found E5 myself.
Well, you did a little bit more than dabble in Christianity. I mean, the word on the street is that you was winning souls for Jesus in the cell block. You were like the Paul of the cell block.
Hey, the Bible say go and make disciples.
And that's what you was doing.
Go and make disciples.
Right. Yeah. So besides being an E5 and being a priest of E5, you find yourself as a member of another community, and that's really what we want to talk about here today. And so you, I don't know maybe the right word, practice or part of the BDSM community. Tell us about BDSM, what exactly that is, and how did you get involved in that?
Okay, so BDSM is a community that's sort of built around alternative sexual practices. So there's all the dramatic stuff, the bondage, the masochism, sadomasochism, all of that kind of stuff. Those are all ways of just exploring the way that power and transfers of authority can impact our sexual experiences. And there's just a community that's built around that, because obviously that's an alternative sexual practice, something we don't really do here in the mainstream. Sort of in our mainstream sexual sort of understandings, it's not really accepted in a lot of places. Like for example, if you have a security clearance and they catch you out here, you can lose your security clearance, you lose kids, that sort of thing. And that tends to be something that was a little bit more prevalent in years past, but now there's a level of acceptance where it's a lot easier to talk about it openly. I've been a part of that community, I want to say maybe about 14, 15 years now. And I am actually an educator there. So I teach people how to participate in a way that's safe. And I've been doing that for, I want to say about 5 or 6 years. Now, I blame my participation in this community on sort of two things. So the Janet Jackson Velvet Rope Tour, I don't know if y'all remember. I don't know if y'all remember, but she used to strap a dude to a cross. And they were like straddle dude and gyrating. I remember being 12 years old because it had to be like 99, right? And I remember at 12 years old looking like, I want to do that.
Like you were at the concert, or you saw this like something?
I saw this on the Velvet Rope Tour was like on HBO. So like they're like you know how Renaissance doing like the movie now? It was like that, but they used to do that on HBO. They would show the concerts on HBO, and we had an HBO free weekend, and so I was looking at it and I was like, oh yeah, I'm about that. So that was kind of the start. Like that image was like burned in my head. And then after that, again, another product of free HBO weekends was the Real Sex documentaries.
Classic.
And so the Real Sex documentaries, like I'm 12, 13, ain't got no business watching Real Sex, but I got TV in my room, so that is what it is. So I'm watching that and I'm looking at all of this stuff. I'm 12, 13 years old, you know, hitting puberty, hormones going crazy. And I'm learning a lot of stuff I probably had no business knowing. So that's kind of the start.
Right.
Wow.
Who Made Y'all Priest? Episode 2, The King Priest. Take 2.
So we talk about these communities, and in prior episodes we talked about the LGBTQIA plus community. Are those synonymous? Do they overlap? Are the LGBTQIA plus community part of the BDSM community as well?
Yeah, there's actually significant overlap. Part of that is because being a part of that community, what happens is that, you know, you're located outside of sort of the norm. You're an outcast, you're an outlaw. And so part of, I want to say, the coping process is that you kind of embrace that identity of being an outlaw. And so you look for other outlaw shit to do. Because you don't have examples of queer sort of sexuality in mainstream media like heterosexual folks do. You know, you start looking for other different things and you get into exploring. So you see a higher incidence of like polyamory, multiple, you know, kind of relationships and things like that in queer communities. You see heavy investment into, you know, things like kink and BDSM, you know, because it's just an outlaw thing to do to a certain extent. But also like people, everybody's sort of exploring. When you're sort of queer and, you know, world doesn't make space for you in that way, you start finding the spaces that work for you and queerness. And kink happens to be a space that's safe for queer people. A lot of what is done in the kink community is actually from queer people. So that's places where queer folks are actually leaders and are the cultural generators for what goes along, what happens a lot in kink. There are kink subcultures within the subculture. So if you want to talk about the leather subculture, which is an aspect of or a subculture within the kink subculture, you know, those are all queer men and women, you know, that have sort of started that off and sort of created sort of that iconography, the look. I don't know if you all have ever watched the Police Academy. You remember that bar that they went into?
Yeah, I remember that bar. Right.
Those are Leathermen, right? You know, like I know people who knew the folk who were in that movie or participated, you know, who know that subculture, who are around those kind of places, you know, who have sort of that history. Those folks are still alive and kicking for the most part, you know, so there's a lot of overlap, you know, with queer community just because it's an accepting. One of the primary rules, I guess the highest moral and ethical value in kink is consent. So what two people decide they want to do with each other is their business and there's just no judgment.
So you talk about kink and you talk about BDSM. So I'm assuming they're not necessarily the same. Maybe like it's levels to it or different. So break that down to like the difference between your use of BDSM and kink.
So when I'm saying kink, I'm generally referring to like maybe a specific practice or a specific activity. So like if you like to spank your partner or you like to tie them up or whatever, like that's a kink. That's a thing that you really like during your sexual activity, or maybe the sexual activity in and of itself. When I refer to BDSM, I'm really kind of talking about the subculture at large.
Which is the
Community.
ball and gag and being tied up.
Well, all of that stuff those are specific kinks or specific fetishes. Like when I talk about BDSM as like a whole, I'm talking about like the community. So
okay.
Folk you go out to eat dinner with, folk who are showing up at your weddings and your funerals, that kind of thing.
So BDSM is like saying LGBTQIA plus, and kink is like saying tranny or lesbian.
Kinda. I would say the difference between that is that when I'm talking about the BDSM community, I'm talking about the people, right?
Oh, okay.
I'm talking about the people. A kink or is an activity. It's a thing that you do.
Like wax play.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I just for
don't tell too much of your business.
Hey, no. So just for the purposes of this show, I had to do a little bit of research. You know what I'm saying? So I could be somewhat informed and intelligent as I'm having the discussion. Right. So, yeah.
Now, most people's frame of reference for anything spiritual is the church. And they may hear you say that you are a priest and at the same time talking about things like kink and BDSM. And that may ruffle a few feathers. That may be abrasive to a lot of people. So what do you say to those people who say, how can you be a priest and simultaneously be a part of the BDSM or the kink community?
Well, I answered that question with a question and saying, who says I can't? Right? That's always my response to that. Because what I want to do is I want to draw attention to the assumptions that people are making about what it means to be spiritual and about what the kink subculture is all about. I understand why people have those assumptions. We live in a very sex negative culture. It is not unheard of for people with spiritual authority or, with authority in general to abuse that, to coerce sex out of people. We live in a patriarchal society where violence is a thing that happens, and there is violence in BDSM. It's consensual, but nevertheless. So I understand why the red flags are there. When we're talking about Black folk, there's a lot of cultural trauma around sex and sexuality, and not just in terms of sexual assault, but generational trauma in terms of being exploited, having sexual stereotypes about our communities, and that impacting how we are treated, how we are handled in society. There are sexual economies of slavery, that have, some significant and tremendous impacts on our culture, throughout the generation. So I understand why folk have those hangups. When we talk about Christianity, that being people's dominant frame of reference when it comes to spirituality, you have Thomas Aquinas, St. Augustine, Clemens of I want to believe, whose sexual politics, or teachings on sexuality are very, very negative. We have this separation between the mind and body here in Western society, being based off, the Greeks and Romans to an extent, where we present anything that's of the mind as being higher, as being the high vibrational thing, and anything of the body is then low vibrational. So you have all of these different parts of our socialization at work that is impacting what we believe is spiritual and what we believe isn't, what we believe is dirty, what we believe is pure or whatever. And so, my existence and being into the things that I'm into kind of challenges that. So I just follow through with it. I just ask them, who says I can't?
Yeah, that's beautiful. We talked last season. We had an episode we talked about, in E5, we haven't created a culture. So what we did was, since the majority of us either left the church or was kind of church adjacent, like Awo Oseun said, he didn't grow up in church. I didn't grow up in church. I think that's one of the best things, or one of the best decisions my mother made, as far as is, the way I was raised, because I wasn't born, or I guess groomed, to have a bias.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to kind of just go out and take a look at everything and make my own choices about, what fit me best. But because sex is so taboo in the church, and we don't have a culture or a cultural identity when it comes to spirituality, we just use what we knew. And, when it comes to sex, we, for the lack of a better word, we get really weird, about things of that nature. So it makes sense to why we would kind of have that, that experience, or we would relate sex as negatively as we do, or make it so taboo.
But you know
go
what's
ahead.
hard for me to understand is that in the same communities where sex is so taboo are the communities in which the most sexual abuses occur.
That
Like
part.
talking about the Catholic Church and those priests that have this vow of sanctity, and then we hear all of these allegations of them molesting children. So it seems that wherever sex is taboo, is its most taboo. I think we have to watch those people in those communities who speak so negatively about sex and about the body. What do you think about that, Awo Olameni?
I think of it in terms. I think we just generally have, particularly as we look into Christianity, I think they have a real problem in terms of reconciling with the body. Right, our sexual urges are natural, but the theology is rooted in, like, if you go and you read St. Augustine, you read Thomas Aquinas, you will see them talk about like marriage as the compromise for your inability to control your sexual desires.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, the ideal is that you are able to sort of exert the necessary self-control and devote yourself fully to Christ. And the church has never really gotten away from that as a sort of foundational doctrine for how we deal with sex, precisely because it's so taboo, right?
Right.
And these are just natural urges. And so like, when I think about what it is to have these urges and then not have an outlet, and the internal friction that causes, and then thinking that then, heaven forbid you gay, right, or lesbian or bi, you're in those spaces where not only you can't, you feel constrained sort of in your ability to go and have sex, but also who you're having sex with or who you desire to have sex with. Those are some very, very difficult situations, and they just don't have the tools to help folk reconcile that, to talk about, in what ways are we able to engage with this part of ourselves while also maintaining a level of fidelity to our ideals and our principles. Mm-hmm. As a priest of Ifa, and coming out of that sort of tradition and being involved in the communities that I'm in, I look at sort of that need for us to then rethink a lot of things about how we approach sex. Like, it's always amazing to me, particularly given how many people come to Ifa in rejection of white supremacy, in rejection of the church, but have never, ever once thought that their understandings of sex, sexuality, gender do not also carry the taint of white supremacy. They've just never questioned it. And it's like, for me, as somebody who operates in spaces where people are all across the gender spectrum, people are all across the sexual spectrum, doing all kinds of crazy things, these things are normal for me. I don't blink. It's not an issue. And so my understanding of sexuality is like, when I think about sexuality and I think about the spiritual aspects of that, I think about sexuality mirrors the way spirit seeks intimacy with us, right? So the intimacy I seek with another person mirrors the intimacy spirit seeks to have with me. Right? It's an integration of the mind body, sort of, as opposed to sort of a rejection of the body.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I think we would probably get some negative feedback and some negative comments if we didn't ask a couple of things for our lukewarm E5 practitioners. You know what I'm saying? The saints, we're going to cover all the things that the saints want to hear. Those who are saved, sanctified, and filled with the Holy Spirit. But for the lukewarm people, we do not want to leave them out here, because here at the Who Made Y'all Preach podcast, we are servants and we serve everyone.
Right.
So with that, again, this is for them. This isn't for me. So let's talk about what this thing really looks like, right? Mm-hmm. Because according to my Google searches, there were things like kink parties and stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. So these types of things that go on in the BDSM community, like, walk us through that. Like, what does that look like? Like, one of these parties, like, what's going on?
Okay, so I guess what you can start with, I guess we could look at it from the perspective, like, if you wanted to sort of come kick it, right?
Yeah. Want to dip your toe in the water.
You would dip your toe in the water. I think the first thing you would start with is that you would find an online community. Those used to be Yahoo groups back in the day. Mm-hmm. There are websites now. There are groups on Facebook. There's FetLife now, which is essentially Facebook for kinky people. And from there you can find local events, in your community that are, for whatever it is that you're looking for. Whether those are, related to particular fetishes, whether those are parties, a variety of different, kinds of situations or whatever it is that you're looking for. But most folks will start with what's called a munch. And a munch is essentially...
Hey, that sounds wild already. So somebody be like, hey, I'm going to this munch. You trying to go?
You'd be like, oh, what you doing? But what a munch is it's like just going out to eat with other people who are in the community. And it affords you an opportunity to go meet people, see who's around, and just get to know folks, and kind of takes the scare factor away. But that's for a lot of people the first major hurdle, after, sort of just admitting it to yourself and start, looking around online. Mm-hmm. Most of the places will require you to go to a munch or two before you start getting invited back to, parties and stuff like that, just so they can get a sense of you, get a chance to sort of vet you, see who see whether, your character's on the up and up.
Mm-hmm. Make sure your freak meter ain't way out of bounds.
I mean, it's not even that, right? It's really about you want to make sure that, you're going to respect people's privacy. You're not going to create a situation, because a lot of times these events happen in folks' homes, occasionally there are venues and stuff like that. But the events, vary. They can be huge 1,000-person events, over 1,000-person events, depending on where you're at, what you're going on. I remember I used to throw parties several years ago. We were doing maybe 70, 80 people, in a venue.
Things like Trojans.
It's a lot of situations. So that's kind of, you want to go, and it's just about getting to know people, getting to understand the community, so that people can develop a level of trust with you, and then you can get into some of the events that you're actually looking to sort of participate in. A lot of places will require you to go to an educational. Most of these places will do the one-on-ones. They give you the rundown on the culture, what to do, what not to do. Give you an opportunity to perhaps try some things. Learn about different fetishes, that you can participate in, so you can start developing, what you like and what you don't like.
So if you want to do more than just dip your toe in the water, though, right? So when you get all past the orientation, right, and they all right, now you invited to the big game. What does that look like for my lukewarm?
What it
Okay.
looks like is going into a room full of people, and I'm telling you, it's not what the porn looks like. Anybody that goes in with that sort of kind of perspective is going to be disappointed because these are regular people, right? Not people who are being carefully selected and a part of an industry that's meant to sell you an unrealistic fantasy. So these are regular folks, and you're going to go and you're going to see all different kinds of bodies, all different kinds of expressions, and people doing their thing. For you to watch, or for you to, see what's up. You can see, some different activities in action.
Like,
What you see will kind of vary based on where you are. There are certain areas that have more expertise in a certain area. So you go one place, you may see a bunch of people doing rope, right? You go to another place, you have a bunch of people doing like needle stuff, piercings, things like that. You go someplace else and you see more people doing sort of impact with floggers and paddles and stuff like that.
Wow. So the picture I get in my head is like probably something I got off a movie or something that I saw on some type of video. It's crazy because I had a friend of mine tell me about things like swingers clubs and
those two.
What's the thing in Jamaica?
hedonism.
All of these different things. It was like it was crazy for me to hear about. Now I know people have their different kinks and fetishes, but I never thought about an entire community actually getting together and participating in those things.
Yeah. I mean, we're living in a world that is less and less religious. And so you have more and more people who are, going through their life and are looking for excitement. They're looking at their fantasies and are less constrained by religious, mores and values to be able to be like, go and explore. And so it's just more of a market, particularly post-pandemic, because everybody was locked inside with nothing to do. So folk was on OnlyFans exploring and saw some stuff that they liked. And so this is what it is now.
Right. So what's the thing called with the paddle? Like, does that have a special name? Getting spanked?
It's just a particular implement.
Okay.
Wow.
So how does for my lukewarm followers, they want me to ask these questions. So how does one become the guy doing the spanking?
You develop the skill, right? If you want to do it, it's really just simple. You go get a paddle and then learn how to spank someone in a way that doesn't not hurt, but in a way that doesn't harm. It's about understanding where you can hit a person with that paddle. It's about appreciating the level of intensity, right? Because you want to have an enjoyable sort of experience, or that bottom wants to have an enjoyable experience. So they're going to have certain needs in terms of how hard they want to be hit or how hard they don't want to be hit. Places they do want to be hit, places they do and may do and do not want to be touched. You have to refine your consent and negotiation skills. So you have to understand what consent is. Make sure that you're following through on that. Make sure you're having strong negotiations. A negotiation is essentially just a conversation where you and the person you are intending to play with in this instance, to give this spanking or this paddling to, you want to make sure that you're adhering to the things that they need in order to feel safe and comfortable enough to allow you to do that.
Now you used the word, you said bottom. Now, usually when I hear the term bottom, my mind immediately goes to homosexual men. So how are you using the term bottom?
I mean, kind of in the same way, right? So the bottom is the passive receiver, and then the top is the one doing the work, so to speak.
So the man doing the spanking is the top, and the person getting spanked, or
whoever.
I guess it could be a woman. Yeah, whoever's doing the spanking is the top, and who getting spanked is the bottom.
in that particular instance.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, according to my research, I mean, these paddles come in all kind of different shapes and different, made out of different materials, this, that, and the other. But I also see that they have like these things that's like old cowboy movies, like the thing, what's it called, the spur on the back of the heel.
Oh, Wartenberg wheel.
Yeah, that thing.
Yeah.
And then go ahead.
So that's so the Württemberg wheel are generally what are considered sensation tools. So one of the misnomers or misconceptions of BDSM is that everything has to hurt or that everything is pain centered, and that's not the case. You can participate in kink and not inflict a lick of pain on anybody. And so a Württemberg wheel is generally used in what's called sensation play. So it's a way of creating different sort of sensations on a person's body, and it's not necessarily pain. So like wax play is often considered sensation play because it's not like, painful. Or temperature play is another way that wax play is understood because it's hot and then it cools off and hardens. There are lots of things you can do with ice that aren't painful, can be uncomfortable, but aren't painful. Württemberg wheels, different kinds of materials. There's fire people that use in sensation play, like they'll light a torch. There's electrical devices, E-stem devices, violet wands, and things like that are used in sensation play that are actually electric current, stuff like that.
So really, people like us would be considered vanilla, right? Because a lot of these things I've never heard of before. And how do you find out what you like? Like with all of these different things out there for people to derive sexual pleasure and gratification from, how do you find out whether or not you like these types of things? Or how do you find out that you do like these types of things?
Dip your toe in the water.
I mean, it's one of those things. It's learned by doing. You go into a party, you go into an event, you hear a conversation about somebody talking about something, then you're like, that sounds cool. And then you go and learn more. And then you try it, right? And then you decide, I like that. And then you get a little deeper into it. And then if you don't like it, you move on to whatever's next.
So with that, what was your first experience like at one of these kink events?
This is funny. So I was super nervous about going to my first party because I was like, I'm gonna get caught. There's gonna be a reporter there, and I'm gonna lose my job. It's gonna be crazy. So I actually showed up to my first party in like a Bane mask.
That's hilarious.
Because I grew up wrestling and I'm a big wrestling fan. So like I just thought like a luchador's mask would look cool. And it would just be a party until I got, comfortable. But it's also extra silly because like I have terrible vision. So I have this mask on. I don't have my glasses on, so I really can't see. So like I'm trying to like navigate through this party. And then like eventually I just like took the mask off but like I spent maybe my first 2 or 3 parties just like watching and look for what sound cool, looking it up. And then I was raised in this community, what's called old school. A good friend of mine calls it being classically trained. And so I started on the bottom. So in order to develop experience on what it is to do something to someone else, I always experience it first. So before I started flogging people, I got flogged a lot. So that I could understand, what that interaction, what it meant to be in that particular position. I've tried a lot of things, tried a lot of things, bottom for a lot of things, so that I could have that understanding, that empathy, for what, I may be potentially topping on another person for. So like needles, electricity, fire, with various impact tools. I've experienced all of those, to understand what I may potentially be doing to another person.
Spirit always knows how to come through. Because I was trying to figure out, how do I ask him if he was a bottom? I didn't really know how to say it.
I've done it all.
And you know what? My Benji just felt me and he just went there with us. See, that's what
So,
happens when you go into the both do together, and
just
you know
know.
what I'm saying? Yeah, you go back in the womb and you are reborn together. You just be on that type of time with one another. So yeah, I
Right.
was like, man, how I asked this?
Right. Right.
So I've done it all. I had a mistress for 8 years
Mm-hmm.
that I served, and she taught me a lot. She's really responsible for a lot of things I'm able to do now, and she really sort of guided me, um, and to a certain extent kept me safe in a lot of situations. Because one of the things that happens is like when you're sort of brand new, you're running around, everything's cool. You want to do everything with anybody, and not everybody's right for you. Some people play at an intensity level that you're not ready for. Some people are in fact bad actors in the community. Everything has a light in the dark.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
And so being steered properly and things like that. So I give a lot of honor and respect to her for bringing me up, and showing me the way in that respect.
That's
Mhm.
dope. That's dope. Now, as a man,
Mhm.
being a bottom, specifically with like getting spanked, like was that something that you liked? Like you were like, hey, this is all right. I can get into this.
So it's a different experience, right? Because so much of it is battling, what you have been taught being a man is about, right?
Mhm.
Mm,
And 99% of men, if you tell them like, hey, come here, we're gonna take you to this place, but you got to get spanked or something like that, or that, oh, we had to spank, they're gonna be like, no, I ain't doing that shit. Like whatever. That's
right.
not how we are socialized. It is perceived as weakness. And there are a lot of people in the kink community who are a lot of men in the kink community who are tops or who are dominants because they're men and that's just what they believe they should be. That is not really
Mm,
reality for people. For a lot of folks, some folks would love being submissive as well, or bottoming as well. I wanted to, and I'd done a lot of reading and sort of a lot of internal battling with myself about it because I wanted to just experience it for what it was and try to be as free from judgments as much as possible. And that really required me to sort of go into myself and understand and sort of question some of the terms of masculinity that I've been taught and raised with. And if I hadn't done that, I think I really would have cut my experiences short. I wouldn't be able to do some of the things
mm,
that I would be able to do now. I wouldn't have some of the sensitivities. I will, in fact, say that my time that I spent as a submissive has made me a better priest because it taught me about service, right?
Mhm.
It's
mm,
really easy as a priest to get into your ego. You got people dobaling you. You have access to this information. You've gone through these rituals and ceremony. You have title now. Um, you know, if you lack maturity, that'll go to your head. And it'll turn you, and it'll put you in a place of osobo for real, for real.
Mhm.
Being in that position where you're submissive, where you have someone to answer to, where you have a certain set of responsibilities to another person, um, impacts how I see my role as a priest. I am a priest. I mean, first and foremost for myself, right? But in any community work that I do, it's a position of service.
absolutely.
You know, like my job, my work as a priest to the community is to help other people. It's to be in service to them for their needs. And so I take that very serious, and that's an ethic that I carry with me. Um, so I'm happy that I was able to get over myself in that particular situation, and then find someone who was on the up and up. Um, but that's tough. That's a battle for a lot of folks. That's a battle for a lot of women and femme folks as well, because a lot of them are, that's a very vulnerable position to be in,
Mhm.
really. Um, but you see people, spread across, that continuum. There's some people who are submissive or more dominant with people based on their interactions with them or the energy that they feel from the person. So I'm always constantly surprised to see spirit move in BDSM in unique ways. You can see,
Absolutely.
because we know that spirit speaks a language of sincerity. People moving with sincere energy. You're watching in some cases, healing take place, right?
Mm.
You know, you're watching people let go of things in real time. You know, in these, you know, amazing events. I remember I was at an event and I was watching someone get I think it was they were getting whipped while playing the piano, and they were a child pianist, and it was something that they had to do. This was like childhood trauma they were working through this event and through this community. And I just sat there and I was just like, wow, that's crazy. Like I would have never, you could have told me something like that happens. I wouldn't have believed you until I saw it. So you know, our sexuality, our sexual expression can be profound places of healing and profound vehicles, you know, for us to get through some things, you know, that we've been holding on to.
Man, that was beautifully said. There's a piece in that where you were speaking, and I was thinking to myself, like this is E5. And I remember having a conversation with our Luo and him saying that, you know, he likes being around priests because his conversation all day, every day is E5. And what he was saying was he wasn't talking about like where he's sitting around with people literally talking about Orisha and Odu and ritual and things of that nature. But in the conversation and as his perspective on things is all tied to our spiritual practice. Mm-hmm. So when you were going through there in that piece, and I was thinking to myself, and I'm glad that you started talking about and relating it to you being a priest, because I was thinking to myself, that right there is E5. And I don't think people other than people who are truly spiritualists would actually capture the spirituality in what you were saying. So that was very beautifully stated. So I wanted to ask, so I remember last season when we had the episode with all of the veggies, all 10 of us having a conversation. And in that, you talked about people in the BDSM community needing a priest. And I think you kind of maybe touched on that a little bit, you know, here a minute ago. But explain that a little bit more. Like when you were saying that, what did you mean by that? And what did you see or experience that, you know, that came from?
Sure. So the obvious answer is divination is a cheat code, right? And so when you're talking about giving someone permission to run your life, right? That's a very vulnerable place to put in, right? You can't do that with everybody. I would probably be safe to think that most people would be like, you can't do that with anybody. You know, and on the other end of that, being responsible for someone else like that, for being in charge of someone else, is also a very vulnerable position because when it go left, you was the one in charge. So, you know, those are very, very vulnerable positions to be in. People are sincerely seeking it out. And, you know, it can be a dangerous position to be put in. When we're talking about, I mean, we can look at, you know, quote unquote, vanilla relationships and see how twisted up people get over, you know, their, you know, non-kinky relationships, right? And then you want to add in, you know, this is a person, you know, who's in charge of my bank account, right? This is a person, you know, who's telling me when I can, where I can go, where I can't go. This is a person who, you know, on the other end of that, if I have them doing service for me, this is a person who has keys to my home, my businesses or whatever, who's running things for me, you know. These require intense levels of vulnerability. And not only that level of vulnerability, but the stakes are high, right? You know, these are bodies on the line. If I have someone who's going to tie me up and put me in the air, they really got to know what they're doing, right? If you mess that up, you know, you get somebody nerve damage. You know, there are permanent injuries that can happen from some of the things that we're doing in kink. So it's not something to be approached lightly. And with anything that's not to be approached lightly, divination is always a plus. So being able to understand whether or not this person is best for you is a really good thing to have at your disposal. To be able to have divination to help you process the lesson that you may need to learn from an unsuccessful relationship is a beautiful and wonderful thing. To be able to determine whether or not you should let this person do needles on you or flog you or do fire play on you, those are all important questions to ask that, even now that, when people ask me, hey, are you going to be at this party? You're going to be at this thing. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to, I get on the mat for that, and I ask those questions. Kink being kind of a taboo space can attract some people, who are bad actors, who are, seeking to live out, destructive fantasies, things like that. So you have to be careful of those kind of things. You have some people who are dealing and really struggling with some mental health stuff, who may be better, who may not need to be participating in the community. Those kind of things do happen as well. And I do want to sort of make a note there, that's not necessarily represented. That's not really representative of the entire community. But I mean, those things do happen, and you got, people who need some mental health support in, vanilla relationships as well. I think what is the best part for me, however, is the cosmology of Ifa and the way that shifts our perspectives about some of the things that we're doing, right? So when we look at Ifa, and the Yoruba culture writ large, they have a different way of thinking about things than we do here in the West. And that contrast is very useful because it requires us to question things that we've taken for granted. And so a lot of times, like dirty talk and kink is about sort of embracing the way that kinky communities are sort of villainized as being immoral, right? And so we'll use certain terminology that would be very, very insulting in the vanilla world, sort of playfully, or as terms of endearment and things like that. But sometimes people internalize those things. Sometimes that even if we're sort of what's the word that I'm looking for here? Even if we are subverting that language, right? That language still, that subversion still depends on a particular standard being at work, right? Right. So if, like, we'll take the word whore or hoe, for example, that's a gendered slur towards women meant to dehumanize and cow women into bearing the burden of sexual morality in sort of Western society, because we tend to view women as property. We want to have legitimate children to pass down our property, all of that sort of patriarchal history and things like that. Well, if we're in BDSM, right, and we are in our presence sort of in BDSM is a rejection of those things, why are we then using this term in the way that we may be using this term? Are we aware of how we are using this term when we're using it as a pejorative, for example? And the Yoruba cosmology can help us reconstruct or help put those puzzles together about that's stupid, right? Or I'm rejecting that particular thing, right? When you look at ancient African societies, they have third and fourth genders. They have they do not have sort of the discrimination that we have here about being outside of the gender binary. There's a text out there called I think it's Boy Wives and Female Husbands, something like that. Or whatever. I think it's male daughters, female, something like that. But there's couple of books. One of the authors is Ife Adediame, and then the other one is by two anthropologists. But what those texts show is that pre-colonization, we had an expansiveness to gender in Africa, which is an extraordinary contrast from what you may hear, in the barbershop, for example, or in some of the other places in some of the other communities. And so that cosmology, that challenge to sort of Western society's sense of what is normal, I think is very, very powerful and very, very healing for a lot of people. There are an extraordinary amount of people who are in BDSM because it allows them space to reject what has been placed upon them in Western society. You have people who are there, who are being creative, who are reveling in sort of their sexual energy because this is a place that allows them to do so without any repercussions.
So do you think that the BDSM community is solid? Do you think this is a fad? Do you think that this is only going to be around for a season? Is the BDSM community and the people that participate in those things, is this a trauma response? Or do you feel like this is something that's here to stay?
I definitely think it's something that's here to stay, but it's not necessarily for everybody, right? I think we are in a moment where it's very popular, right? And everything has its ebbs and flows. So it'll calm down at some point or whatever. But whether or not you stay in it or not is really dependent upon you as an individual. There are some people who come around and they're there, and it's a youthful indiscretion sort of thing. It's a fun story. Say, man, I remember I used to go to these parties. I've got plenty of people who I'm still close to who don't come out anymore. Just because life responsibilities don't allow them. They have children. They have work responsibilities that keep them from being out. I am a lot less active than what I was sort of in my 20s and early 30s, just because between being a priest, right, and priesthood and the responsibilities of that, the stuff we got to learn, studying we have to do, as well as just like, life and work responsibilities and just getting older, like running up to Baltimore, DC, on a weekend to go to this party, ain't really in the cars anymore. Like you just like at 36, like, bro, I'm not going up there and coming back the same night. Like I just ain't doing that.
Right.
So a lot of it depends on, you as an individual, what your situation is. I know people who have been around in BDSM 20, 30, 40 years, who are around and teaching and educating. So it just depends on what you get out of the community. And a lot of that is what you put in it. If you're just in, looking for a little bit of fun, you may not be around very long, not for any negative reason, but, you go, you have the experience and like, okay, that was cool. And then you're out. People find partners in relationships and then settle down, and it's not something they do anymore. So it really does vary. In terms of it being a trauma response, I think that's a popular narrative that I think a lot of people in the BDSM community would find a little condescending, just because of that's rooted in a stigma. A lot of people look at people who are in BDSM and think that BDSM is a symptom of their trauma. And I think for most people, and I'm not saying that doesn't happen, because it does, but I don't think it's nearly as pervasive as people would present it as. I would say that the BDSM community for a lot of people is a way that folk cope with their trauma in a non-destructive way. When you are, particularly as we're talking about, our LGBTQIA folks, right? If you're asexual, right, and you are sex repulsed in terms of like penetrative sex, BDSM may be a way for you to interact sexually with a partner and connect in that energy with a partner, where previously you just might not have that option, or you feel coerced into doing something you feel repulsed by it. It's a method of self-expression. It's a place of freedom and acceptance, which, if you're, a outlaw, right, world doesn't accept you, you're an outcast. That's a powerful thing. Like, this is folks' community. These are people who are like, if I was to get married, like, my bridal party is kinky people. These are my folks,
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So I think it's community for a lot of people. And community is how we cope with trauma. I don't think that trauma is necessary. I think a lot of times we talk about trauma, we talk about healing for trauma. Healing for trauma is not returning to the pre-traumatized version of you, right? That's done once the trauma has happened, right? What healing is not necessarily not being triggered, but understand I'm triggered right now. Here's how I deal with this constructively. And I think for a lot of folks in the BDSM community who are struggling with trauma, BDSM is a part of their protocol for dealing constructively with that.
I think that was beautiful how you said that dealing with trauma, you do not return back to your pre-traumatized self.
Right.
I think so I'm hoping that a lot of people didn't miss that you don't go back to who you were before you were traumatized. You just figure out a way to cope with the trauma, or figure out a way, like you say, to understand that you are being triggered right now, and how do you work yourself through that. That's beautiful.
Absolutely. One thing I want to pull on a little bit, where you were saying it's not a trauma response, but it could be a way of coping with your trauma. Or for a lot of people, it's that, to me, I look at those as semantics, even though I know that trauma response has a negative connotation to it. But for me, I would say a lot of people came to African spirituality or other forms of spirituality, whether it's yoga, Buddhism, Hinduism, so forth and so on, as a trauma response associated with organized religion. Sometimes, and we all know this, as priests and being taught by our Luo, is that things that we ask for, certain things that happen to us to help us grow, evolve, and push us towards our purpose. So if your purpose was to explore yourself sexually, then, and you came about that through a response or a way of coping, however you want to, term it, with some kind of trauma, to me it's fitting, right? It's part of the medicine. And to me, that doesn't or shouldn't downplay whatever you turn to, as long as whatever you turn to is positive.
Right. And that's key, right? Going back to sort of that question about how I respond to people who say, like, how are you a priest in doing that? Again, the goal for me in educating people who are not kinky is to help them understand where they get their ideas about this being a negative from. Right. Like, I want them to engage with that. Like, why is your knee-jerk reaction to someone, having sex, arguably having better sex than you, as this negative by which you sit in judgment because it's different. Like, I've listened to people quote Christian doctrine at me who aren't Christians, and I'm just like, hey, wait a minute, what are we doing here?
Right.
This isn't what you practice. You don't care about that. Like, you're very, very, sort of aggressive about not caring that. But here you're deploying it because I'm doing something different. And a lot of times folks just haven't been exposed to it and haven't been challenged that way. I've had folks in the tradition be like, I don't know, like, should you be doing that or whatever? But again, these are places where we haven't been challenged. And as a diviner, people coming to my mat, this is a part of their lives, not just kink, but like sex, sexuality, whatever. These are things that are a part of people's lives that somebody needs to have some focus on so that we can advise those people, effectively. Because, people are out here having sex. People are out here exploring their sexuality. And, to get back to the question about, like, why did this community need a priest, is that, as somebody who has, done swinger things, who's been to kink stuff or whatever, I'm a safe place for you to go and talk and not feel ashamed. You know what I'm saying? Not feel uncomfortable, not feel judged, right? And I think, and as our Luo is fond of saying, we have to find the middle, right? And we have to be in that middle, because if the last thing you want is to have a client on your mat lying to you, that complicates what I got to do, right?
Right.
That's a client not serving themselves well in that moment, because the old dudes are going to fall the way that they need to fall. I'm gonna see it anyway. You just create more work for me because I got to now convince you got to stop lying to yourself and lying to me in turn, right? And so to be able to be in a situation where I can interact with these people as a person who understands their stuff, right? A person they don't have to justify themselves to, I can open them up to this beautiful tradition that can really help them move forward, help them heal. And and for me, that's probably, that's such a huge thing, to be a safe space for people to come, because, like, these are the outcasts, these are the outlaws, these are the people who have traditionally not had space within this tradition and within religion and spirituality, more broadly, to be able to come, receive counseling, to be able to ask those kind of questions and not have to hide.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I feel personally, and this to me is even going back to the story of Jesus and understanding who Jesus ran around with according to the Bible. If you can't find a priest at a kink party, on the block, in the club, somebody, and I'm talking to the priest, somebody's not operating a purpose, because we supposed to be, not all of us are supposed to be in all of these different places, but there should be a representation of the community, or in the from the standpoint of priesthood in all of these different places, right? Everybody needs a priest, you know what I'm saying? And people need priests that are relatable to
Right.
their specific scenario, their specific situation. Somebody that can say, "I understand," what you're going through. I know what that looks like. Not saying because they try to necessarily pull you out of that, but it could just be to help you navigate through it, right? Or to help you be in tune with yourself, help you be comfortable with yourself so you can maneuver through those things more effectively. So, I think it's beautiful, and as a priest, hey, you never know where you might find me just observing, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Being a beacon for the people.
Right. Right. I feel like that's one of the reasons why we started this podcast and kind of jokingly named it "Who Made Y'all Priests," because we wanted to present ourselves as, the everyday person, the everyday man that just happened to fall into some knowledge, happened to go through some ceremony, happened to be called priests now, but we are just regular, everyday, down to earth, practical men doing this thing. And so I feel like we are relatable. We want to be relatable. We don't want to talk or speak from a raised stage. We kind of want to be down with the people, amongst the people, in the midst of the people. Like Fafore said, the way that Jesus walked around with the sinners. Yeah, we want to be. That's where I want to be at. I want to be with the sinners. I don't want to be with the saints.
Yeah,
Absolutely. That's not any fun. And like, we talked about before, I mentioned it, when people debate to me, I don't want to have to hop off my throne in order to raise them back up. I want to already be, on my feet, so.
Yeah. So I'm one of those people that believe that people derive sexual pleasure from a wide spectrum of things. Like, it's said that the fear and pain responses are very close to sexual ones. So what are your thoughts about that? About deriving sexual gratification from pain and from fear and from things like that?
Yeah, I mean, those are very common. There are entire kinks that are rooted in fear response. One of the most popular is interrogation play, where you're doing like a mock interrogation with the purpose of, figuring out like a secret or getting some piece of information. So, we're really creative about sort of creating those scenarios to sort of engage in those things. A lot of sort of the, some people like really like enjoy having the aggressive top. They want to feel a little bit scared, right? That sort of thing. In terms of pain response, I mean, pain as a physiological response is not really something that you can help. Like, you stub your toe, right? But what you decide that pain means is a little bit more flexible. And there are some people whose relationship with it is an endurance. So you'll have some bottoms whose goal in their bottoming is to endure whatever you dish out and then like talk shit to you about it. And then there are some people who genuinely derive sexual gratification from pain. I have been flogging someone and they had an orgasm on the cross.
Like flogging.
Yeah. Surprise a little bit daylight side of me. Like, and I know how this sounds. I know it sounds like I'm lying. I know it sounds like a wailer, but like, it's a thing that happens.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Just before I met you, man, you probably could have told me any of these stories and and I believed it. I just would have never believed that there were whole communities out there like this. I know my experience with things sexual of that nature would all be considered sexual deviancy. So those are just things that we wouldn't even consider.
Yeah, I mean, like it's even within kink, like the deviant thing is a joke, like
Right.
because again, who is deviant and who is not deviant is a matter of who's making rules, right? You know what I'm saying? Those are all value judgments, and your value judgments are based on perspective.
Mm.
You know,
What got you so weak, Fafore?
Man, you are hilarious. But I feel you. But you know, man, you are hilarious though. Oh
Yeah.
my God.
No, this is a beautiful conversation because I think, especially amongst us, and especially amongst the people that are gonna eventually watch this and listen to this, that this is a conversation that needed to be had, so that people can understand that priests, that we are out here amongst the people doing a myriad of things.
Absolutely. I think I would be good at interrogation play. You know what I'm saying? I think I'd be good at that.
yeah. I think more than anything, I think I want people to take away that is to start digging into some of our areas of sexual shame and start thinking about what our sexual practice means about us as individual, right? Look at it as a vehicle and as a window to better understand ourselves, and look at it through the framework of we Shangos, right? So as a Shango person, that as that lust for life, as that sort of masculine virility, and then I'm participating in sort of the sexual lifestyle. Where does that come into play? Start using our sexuality as a tool to learn and understand more about ourselves. If we are, if you have that Yemaya energy, that nurturing other people more than yourself, like, is that showing up in your sex? Are you being fulfilled? Or are you fulfilling someone at the expense of yourself? Are you okay with that? So these are questions that I think are really important for folk to ask ourselves. I want people to sort of do that kind of introspection and start thinking about how the cosmology of this tradition, what this tradition teaches us, and start applying it to areas of our lives that we're scared to talk about, because that's where growth happens.
Right. Right.
Sure.
This isn't the first episode that we've had when we talked about sex. And even in that episode, we talked about the topic of sex being taboo and uncomfortable to talk about. Do you find that in the kink community that sex is a lot easier to talk about, and because of that, the sex is more gratifying, that the sex is better in the kink community?
So I will say yes and no to that question. I will say yes to that question because there's a level of intentionality in kink that makes a lot of things that normally wouldn't be possible, right? So being able to say, this is what I want, this is how I want it, and this is where we're going to meet and all that, being able to have frank conversations about that makes everything better. This is how folk are getting able to live sort of these fantasies, that they like, or getting able to live in these arrangements that suit them better and suit their sexualities better. I will say no, because, we have sort of still have this impact of Western sexual values that still impacts the kink community, where some people feel like that BDSM should not include sex, or that if you're interested in sex or trying to have sex with people that you're playing with, that you're not sort of like officially a part of this community. It's just a vehicle for you to get sex. And there's some people who feel negatively about that. So, it really just depends. Personally, for me, part of the reason I participate in this community is because I enjoy sex. So like to me that's a consent issue. If you want to have sex, you need to ask if that's appropriate, and learning how to ask is a skill that you have to develop. Because I say that because there are a lot of people who will come in and they'll come in and they'll play, but not all play leads to sex. So every time you spank somebody, that don't mean you finna, have sex or whatever. And so you have to approach that conversation. And every interaction or relationships that may not be appropriate,
Yeah, I learned so much in this episode. I feel like every time I'm introduced to something that I'm ignorant about, I walk away with a new vocabulary. I walk away with having learned new words. Again, I think that this was an episode that needed to be had. Fafore and myself, we talked about this episode, about talking about things that we feel like are on the fringe of society. Kind of wanting to reel those things back in and talk about those things freely and comfortably. And yeah, I think we accomplished that with this episode.
Absolutely. I always say an occupational hazard of being priest is the lens in which we view everything. And I am greatly appreciative. And this goes back even before me being a priest, just me being a Virgo, being a life path 7. People who can speak about their thing, whatever that may be, intelligently is beautiful to me.
Right.
I don't care if it's something I'm into. I don't care if it's something I agree with or disagree with. I love when someone has something that they are passionate about or interested in, and they actually are in it to the point where they can speak intelligently about it. And the way that you spoke about this community, the insight that you gave was beautiful, was beyond beautiful. And for that, I am appreciative of that. And I thank you because you really showed how spirit shows up in that community. And everything is spirit, as we say, as above, so below. So spirit is everywhere. Spirit is in murder. Spirit is in gift giving. It's in gratitude. It's in everything. So thank you for shedding light on this community and doing it so beautiful. I think people who are watching this, who are a part of that community, would give you a standing ovation.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate y'all for giving me the space to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart.
Ashe. Thank you, family, for joining us on another great episode. Thank you, Ibeji, for being a part of this with us. The Holy Odu Otor Meji says that by knowing yourself and through self-discovery, you attract the things, the people, the opportunities, the places that are in alignment with you. Right? The beautiful part about self-discovery is it helps eliminate the fear of being who you are, regardless of, how you view your purpose, how you view the thing that you are drawn to. If you are comfortable in yourself because you know yourself, it allows you to live freely. So, as I've been doing the last couple of years or the last couple of seasons, I'm going to end it like I always do. Life is for the living. Live out loud and on purpose. Till next time, we love you. Peace.
Peace.
Peace, y'all.